Delenn of Mir was the Minbari ambassador to Babylon 5 and a founder of the Interstellar Alliance. In 2202, Delenn was born in the southern regions of Minbar, in the family of Mir, a member of the 10th Fane of Elira, a religious clan. As a small child, Delenn's father used to carry her on his shoulders to a temple so that she could see everything. One day, Delenn visited Yedor with her family, and at one point she found herself lost and separated from them. After wandering the increasingly dark and narrow streets, she eventually found herself in an old temple, feeling safe in this place and certain that if she stayed and waited for her parents that they would come for her. After several hours, she eventually fell asleep. When she awoke, Delenn saw a version of Delenn smiling down at her, bright against the darkness. He told her that if she believed, then her parents would come for her, saying, "I will not allow harm to come to one of my little ones in my great house." Just then the doors opened and her parents came running in. Not long afterwards, her mother entered the Sisters of Valeria, a great honor for her family. Delenn would see her again only twice in the next several decades. Though she missed her mother greatly, she respected her decision. As Delenn grew older, her father told her that she had become too big for him to carry anymore. It was that day she realized she would one day lose him. As an older child, Delenn befriended Malin, who even at a young age loved poetry. Delenn remained close to Malin as they grew up, with Malin eventually becoming an accomplished poet, earning the title Shal for her skill in the Talah. After years of training and study on Minbar, in 2232 she was chosen to become an acolyte to the Great Council. At this time she first came aboard. The great Minbari leader Dukat led the council. In 2245, during a debate on contacting a race called humans, Dukat called Delenn into the council chambers and prompted a response from her that embarrassed the rest of the council members. He decided to take her on as his personal aide and chosen disciple. She studied under him to become Satai, a member of the Great Council, standing in for Satai Kadrani before her formal induction. Delenn heard Lanan's appeal for support of the Analashak. Though it was inappropriate, Dukat allowed Delenn to offer her advice on the matter. Lanan warned that the prophecies of Delenn regarding the return of the Shadows was drawing near. Delenn suggested an expedition be sent to the Shadows' ancient homeworld of Zahadum to see where they were. When the warriors on the council rejected this, Dukat decided the council itself would investigate. The ship bearing the Great Council went in secret, with only a couple of support vessels. En route, Delenn discovered Dukat had arranged for some equipment to be brought on board to provide for an alien atmosphere. Delenn suspected Dukat was in contact with the elusive Vorlons, but he did not respond outright. Delenn was inducted into the Great Council during the voyage. During her initiation ceremony, she was presented with a triluminary, which glowed brightly as she brought her hand near it. After the ceremony, she asked Dukat about this, but before he could answer, an alarm sounded. The council came together to see what the alert was about. A fleet of unknown vessels had been shadowing their ships. The Minbari ships turned to approach the alien fleet, opening their gun ports in a traditional sign of respect. Delenn believed the ships were human in origin, a race the Minbari Federation had not actually encountered before. The council also noticed nearby ships belonging to the Soul Hunters, who only came where there was great death. The human ships opened fire on the Minbari vessels, causing severe damage before exiting into hyperspace. Dukat was critically injured. He spoke to Delenn as he lay dying, but at that time she did not hear his message, as she was in shock over what had happened. He died moments later. The surviving council was split on what to do, with Delenn casting the deciding vote to pursue the humans and wipe them out completely. After her rage cooled, Delenn realized that there would be no stopping what she had ordered. The religious and warrior castes were both united in a single desire to destroy the human race completely. Thus began the Earth-Minbari War. And we'll be right back after this. The Earth-Minbari War. Delenn quickly came to regret her decision, but she could not turn back the tide that had been unleashed. With far greater technology, the Minbari easily outmatched the Earth Alliance. Delenn knew that the war would continue to escalate into full genocide, but felt powerless to stop it. At that time, she was contacted by Kosh and Ulcrest of the Vorline Empire, who had been dwelling inside Ducat's chambers aboard the ship. They played a recording of Ducat's, wherein he mentioned that the humans would play a critical role in the upcoming Shadow War. Now more than ever, Delenn sought a way to end the war. After a year of fighting with the humans suffering one retreat or utter loss after another, Delenn and a few of her agents managed to arrange a meeting for Lenon and some human representatives by way of the Narn regime diplomat Jakar. Unfortunately, the meeting was attacked and Lenon was killed. Both sides believed a rogue faction of their own government to be responsible, and all hope of peace died with Lenon. The two human representatives were captured, but after hearing one of them say a phrase taught by Lenon, Delenn allowed them to leave unharmed. Unknown to her at the time, the two representatives were John Sheridan and Stephen Franklin. After nearly 3 years of fighting, the Minbari prepared to make their final assault on Earth itself. Delenn went to Kosh and Ulcrest, still dwelling in Ducat's place, seeking their advice. They replied cryptically, telling her that the truth points to itself. The Grey Council cruiser was present with the rest of the massive Minbari fleet that bypassed Mars and attacked Earth in the Battle of the Line. As the last of Earth's defenses crumbled before the Minbari onslaught, Delenn suggested bringing one of the humans on board for questioning. She pointed at a nearby Star Fury that was attempting a suicide ramming attack, and it was brought on board the ship. The pilot was Jeffrey Sinclair, who was beaten, questioned, and then probed with a triluminary, which glowed brightly when it was brought near him. At the time, the Council discovered something shocking. Sinclair had a Minbari soul. And not just any soul, but the soul of Valen. Delenn easily convinced the Council to end the conflict. Rather than explain this revelation, they issued an order to surrender. The war was over. As for Sinclair, Delenn ordered that his memories be suppressed by means of a telepath. The Council decided that Sinclair needed to be monitored discreetly, so he would not remember the event, and Delenn volunteered to take on the assignment. During the war, Delenn's beloved father passed away. She later said that he died of a broken heart, overseeing his people go to war with the humans. The Babylon Project. The following year, the Earth Alliance launched the Babylon Project in hopes of avoiding any future conflicts such as precipitated the Earth-Minbari War. Unfortunately, the project took almost 10 years to get off the ground, as the first 3 Babylon stations were sabotaged and destroyed before they could be completed. And Babylon 4 disappeared 24 hours after going online. Finally, the 5th station, Babylon 5, went online in 2256. The Minbari Federation was the first to sign on and provided much of the funding for the station, on the condition they would be allowed to choose the station commander. The Grey Council selected Jeffrey Sinclair, but did not reveal the reason why. Delenn came aboard the station in the guise of a simple ambassador. She did not use her honorific title of Satai, nor explain her connection to the Grey Council in any way. She quickly befriended Jeffrey Sinclair and was deeply impressed by his character, finding him to be very much like a Minbari. Shortly after her arrival, she learns of Babylon 4, recognizing it from the surviving records of the war of 1260 to 1261. She remained quiet for fear of disrupting the timeline. In 2257, Kosh was sent to the station to be the ambassador for the Vorlons. He nearly died when an assassin poisoned him as soon as he arrived. Delenn was dismayed when the evidence suggested it was Sinclair, so much so that she did not stand up for him when the Babylon 5 Advisory Council voted to hand him over to the Vorlons. Thankfully, Sinclair was able to prove his innocence. The real culprit was in fact a Minbari assassin from the Windswords clan. Delenn helped expose him and apologized to Sinclair for the incident. And we'll be right back after this. Delenn quickly acclimates to her role as ambassador. The Minbari Federation is slowly turning from its isolationist position and embracing more trade, though by and large the process is slow. Delenn does what she can to encourage peace among the other worlds. In early 2258, she joins Earth in condemning the attack by the Narn regime against Centauri civilian colony at Regish 3. A few weeks later, a strange alien ship drifts through the jump gate and is brought on board the station. Delenn accompanies Sinclair to the med lab where the ship's lone occupant was taken. She is horrified to discover that the alien is a soul hunter. She attempts to seize the PPG from Security Chief Michael Garibaldi and kill it on the spot. but Garibaldi and Sinclair stop her. Afterwards, she apologizes for her hasty reaction, but explains to Sinclair the nature of the Soul Hunters and how they are an affront to the Minbari. A few hours later, she visits the Soul Hunter in Medlab privately, demanding to know if he has any Minbari souls in his collection. The Soul Hunter mocks her beliefs regarding what happens to souls. As they talk, he recognizes her. He was among the Soul Hunters who attempted to claim the soul of Dukat. He knows she is a member of the Grey Council and asks why someone of her rank is their playing ambassador. Troubled by his knowledge of her identity, Delenn leaves. The Soul Hunter escapes and kidnaps her from her quarters. Contrary to the mandates of his order, this Soul Hunter plans on murdering her and taking her soul that way. He begins draining her blood to kill her slowly. As she nears death, his machine allows him to glimpse some of her thoughts, and what he sees surprises him greatly. Fortunately, Sinclair is able to rescue her and kill the Soul Hunter. He takes her immediately to Medlab, where Dr. Stephen Franklin is able to save her. Awakening briefly, Delenn sees Sinclair nearby and deliriously mutters, "We were right about you," before falling asleep again. After she recovers, Sinclair arranges for the dead Soul Hunters collection to be given to her in secret. She cracks the globes containing them, releasing the souls from their captivity. Delenn is sent an aide a few weeks later, a young acolyte named Lanier. She welcomes him in the same way Dukat welcomed her, telling him it's alright to look up. She also explains that he is not to mention her connection to the Grey Council, nor use her title when addressing her. Lanier assists Delenn in putting on a Minbari rebirth ceremony during a week-long series of festivities aimed at highlighting the different religious traditions of the races on the station. Shaul Malin comes to Babylon 5 in early 2258 as part of a tour that will eventually take her to Earth. After a poetry reading, Shaul comes with Delenn to her quarters to catch up. It is very late when she leaves. Just minutes after she does, she is viciously attacked and branded by unknown assailants, part of a wave of anti-alien assaults committed aboard the station. Delenn expresses her outrage and disgust over the attack to Sinclair personally. He assures her that he will catch the assailants promptly. While the investigation continues, Delenn introduces Sinclair to an ambassador named Mila Shar. She is surprised when Sinclair gives both of them the cold shoulders. She later learns that Sinclair's behavior was part of a ruse to get close to Malcolm Biggs, a human member of the Home Guard responsible for coordinating the attacks. Delenn and Shaul, now recovered from her injuries, watch with Jakar as Big and the other perpetrators are deported from the station. A few weeks later, Sinclair is kidnapped by a pair of human agents intent on finding out if he is hiding anything about the Battle of the Line. Delenn becomes aware of his absence and tries to help find him. Sinclair manages to escape his captors on his own, but their treatments have left him delirious. Armed with a PPG, he takes a few shots at station personnel. Delenn ignores the warnings to stay away and confronts Sinclair directly. He raves about knowing her. Then he snaps his delusion without harming her. Later that day, Sinclair visits Delenn in her quarters to thank her for her help. Unknown to Sinclair, another member of the Grey Council has come aboard. Fearful their secret is on the verge of being exposed. Worried he might have remembered something that they had suppressed, Delenn asks a few indirect questions, but Sinclair says he was merely delirious. After he leaves, the other council members warn her that if he should remember, he would have to be killed to keep the secret. Delenn reluctantly states her agreement. When the mass murderer, known as Deathwalker, is found on the station, Delenn is back on Membar. Lanier contacts her with a message from Sinclair, appealing for the Minbari Federation to vote for her to be held for trial on Babylon 5. Delenn instructs Lanier to vote in her place, but the vote is against a trial, on orders from the Grey Council. She explains to Lanier that the Council does not wish to reveal that Deathwalker was being harbored for years by a Minbari clan, the Windswords, which was unknown to the Grey Council for years, but was discovered during the Earth-Minbari War. The Grey Council could not endure the embarrassment of revealing the fact now. A short time later, Delenn is approached by Mola and Tharg, a couple who wish Delenn to intercede on their behalf regarding their son. The boy is dying and Dr. Franklin wishes to operate, despite the fact the family's religious beliefs prohibit the operation. Delenn is torn over the incident, as she believes deeply that their beliefs should be respected. Yet she also knows that Dr. Franklin is doing what he believes is right. Thus she feels her own beliefs prevent her from interfering. Later, a mysterious man named Morden comes to Babylon 5 and schedules a meeting with Delenn. Curious about him, Delenn learns that he has also scheduled a meeting with Jakar, making her wonder if he is approaching all the ambassadors. When he comes to meet her, he simply asks, "What do you want?" As a member of the Grey Council, she was given a kind of implant by the Triluminary. The implant alerts her that Morden is in league with the Shadows. Concealing what she really knows, Delenn demands that Morden immediately leave. She realizes that time is almost at hand. And we'll be right back after this. Sometime later, a man named Gajik contacts Delenn, letting her know that he will be arriving on the station, and hoping that she will help him in a quest. Delenn is honored and moved over the request, as the man is a true seeker, someone deeply revered among the Minbari. She asks Sinclair to provide a full honor guard for his arrival. Sinclair barely conceals his amusement when Gajik arrives and announces he is on a quest for the Holy Grail. Delenn confronts Sinclair about this privately, and he tells her that Gajik is probably the only true seeker in the human race. Delenn, amused, tells him he does not know himself very well. Unfortunately, Delenn can offer no information for Gajik. He is killed shortly thereafter. But a petty criminal who Gajik reforms through his kindness takes up the quest after his passing. Delenn gives him a gift before he leaves with Gajik's body, wishing him well in his journeys. About midway through the year, Shai Brammer, a great hero from the war, dies unexpectedly while on a tour outside the Federation. His clan, the Star Riders, insists on parading his remains through several sectors on a long march back to Membar. Delenn is disgusted by this display, as it goes against the stated wishes of Brammer himself. Before converting to the warrior caste and fighting in the war, Brammer had been an important priest in the religious caste, someone whom Delenn respected and admired very much. She meets Alt Naru, Brammer's former second-in-command, when he arrives with Brammer's body at Babylon 5. She confides her unease in this situation with Sinclair, who is trying to fight off emotions stirred up from the war, while Brammer's body is lying in state privately. Delenn has several of her closest agents stun the Minbari guards and steal the body. Pretending she knows nothing of what has happened, she secretly has the body cremated, intending to have the ashes scattered over Minbari, per Brammer's original wishes. Her plan calls for her to attempt to explain the disappearance as a miracle, but Naru pushes a relentless investigation that even involves him briefly assaulting Sinclair. Delenn's plan goes awry when she is approached by Susan Ivanova about a young woman named Alyssa Belden, a human telepath whose talent has just surfaced. Not wanting Alyssa to join the Psi Corps, Ivanova asks Delenn about Minbari telepaths. During their conversation, Alyssa reads Delenn's mind for a moment. Despite training on how to avoid such probes, Delenn cannot act quickly enough. Alyssa realizes her part in the body's disappearance and tells Sinclair. After acknowledging her part to Sinclair privately, she decides to let Naru know. She issues a direct order for him to remain silent about the incident and apologize to Sinclair for her actions. Naru, a loyal soldier, follows the command. Afterwards, Delenn arranges for Alyssa to be taken in by the Minbari, hoping that she can serve a bridge to better foster relations between her people and the humans. Sometime later, while Delenn successfully negotiates with Londo Mollari a treaty between their empires regarding Sector 119, strange events begin occurring on Epsilon 3. After their negotiations, Delenn is surprised when she arrives at her quarters and finds her old teacher Drawl. She welcomes him warmly and they catch up on old times well into the night. The following morning, over breakfast, Delenn asks Drawl why he has been willing to talk about everything except why he has come to the station. Drawl admits that he had become disillusioned and Moros for his own people and is going to the Sea of Stars, a Minbari tradition fairly common among the elderly. Delenn is distressed, realizing that it means she will never see him again. Drawl, confident in his decision, tells her they should make the most of the time that they have. She agrees and tries to keep a light heart, showing him much of the station. She even introduces him to Londo, who is feeling particularly cheerful. However, Drawl never makes his planned trip. An excursion to the planet by Sinclair and Ivanova returns with an alien named Varn. Drawl leads Delenn to the med lab, where Varn speaks to them briefly. Drawl explains to Sinclair that he had heard Varn's voice calling him the night before, though he does not clearly state that Varn mentioned needing a replacement, a new guardian for the great machine in the planet. After Sinclair leaves, Drawl and Delenn are met by Londo, who offers to pilot them down to the planet with Varn. Delenn is surprised when he admits he knows just as well as she does that Varn expects someone to replace him, someone who will be remaining on the planet. The trio springs Varn from MedLab and makes it to the planet, pursued by Michael Garibaldi. Drawl takes his place in the heart of the machine, stabilizing the planet and issuing an edict that all are forbidden from trying to claim it. Varn explains that Drawl's mind will touch the stars themselves. Delenn says her goodbyes and returns to the station. Once back, Garibaldi asks why Delenn chose to keep the command staff out of the loop. Delenn explains that she had to do it. Otherwise, Sinclair would have been the one in the great machine, and she knows his destiny lies elsewhere. And we could be right back after this. Later in the year, Delenn is summoned to a meeting of the Council. She meets their cruiser in deep space and joins the Nine. The others let her know that at long last they have decided to elect a real, new leader for them. They have chosen her, as she is the most widely traveled and experienced, not to mention the protege of Dukat. Delenn says she does not think it'll be possible, referring to the prophecies regarding the transformation that is supposed to occur. She knows that if she accepts the role as leader, she will never undergo such a transformation, nor indeed even leave the council ship. She calls the council together and states her desire to reject the leadership offer. The others question her actions, and she explains that her part to play in the prophecies is on Babylon 5 with the humans. She defends their importance and reiterates that the second Shadow War is coming. The council votes and by a narrow margin approves her decision. Afterwards, Delenn is secretly given one of the Triluminaries by another member of the council, to be used in her inevitable transformation. She is grateful, although mindful that her actions will almost certainly carry the result of being expelled from the council sooner or later. On December 30th, 2258, Delenn finally finishes a device that she had been building in her quarters since receiving it, and the Triluminary, one that will allow her to undergo the prophesied transformation. She knows that the time must be right, when the shadows have returned. She asks Lanier to go to Kosh and ask if indeed they have returned to their homeworld, Zahadu. Kosh answers in the affirmative. Wishing to rid herself of any remaining threads of doubt about the Vorlons and the upcoming conflict, Delenn goes to see Kosh herself, insisting that he reveal himself to her. Kosh steps out of his encounter suit, and as soon as she sees him, all her doubts are erased. Knowing Sinclair has an important part to play of his own, Delenn tracks him down the following day and shows him the Triluminary, asking if he remembers it. He responds that he does, and that he remembers some of what happened to him on the line. Delenn offers to explain the whole truth to him. Sinclair explains that Garibaldi is missing, and that he cannot do anything else until he is found. Delenn understands, saying that she can wait a little while but not too long. Returning to her quarters, Delenn inserts the Triluminary into the device. It begins constructing a chrysalis. Delenn waits in vain for Sinclair to arrive, but he is delayed. Delenn must enter the chrysalis before she can tell him anything. Lanier stands vigil over her, not knowing how she will emerge. After being in a cocoon for over 2 weeks, Delenn finally emerges in mid-January 2259. When she first emerges, she is in constant pain as her skin is still going through the final phases of her transformation. Lanier discovers her emergence and calls for Dr. Franklin, who comes immediately and is sworn to secrecy by Lanier. Dr. Franklin has little to offer in terms of aid, but Delenn does not actually require any, and soon is completely transformed. She is now part human, with the most obvious change being her bone crest is diminished, and she has grown a full head of brown human hair. Delenn presents herself to the Babylon 5 Advisory Council and to the new station commander, Captain John Sheridan. She explains to him that her transformation is part of a move to better understand humans, so that their races can continue to build up their relations. Presumably, at this time, Lanier explains to Delenn how he told Sheridan and Ivanova the truth about Sinclair, the Battle of the Line, and the belief that humans have been sharing Minbari souls. Despite her intentions, Delenn quickly discovers that her change will bring one trial after another. Still adjusting to the changes in biology, she also experiences headaches and periods of fatigue. Dr. Franklin insists on her coming in for regular checkups. The Minbari community on the station almost immediately expressed doubts about her, questioning whether she is truly Minbari anymore. Not able to reveal the full depths of the ancient prophecies, she asks them for their loyalty and trust. They cannot give it completely and asks to send a representative to the Great Council to relay their concerns. Adjusting to the human characteristics would prove a long and bumpy road. Delenn had no idea how to care for her hair, which required some help from Susan Ivanova to get it ready in time for Londo Malari's Ascension Day party. She also apparently stated having menstrual cramps, something unknown to Minbari women. Additionally, Delenn experimented with human clothing, as well as having purchased a human dress so she could be properly dressed for dinner with John Sheridan. She also began wearing high heels. Nevertheless, Delenn did what she could to adjust and acclimate herself, hoping all the while to better understand humans. She invites Captain Sheridan out to dinner. He is surprised, but agrees, offering to go to the Fresh Air restaurant. Before meeting him there, Delenn buys a human dress guaranteed to turn heads. She and Sheridan enjoy each other's company immensely, discovering that there is more in common between their two peoples than they might have thought. In June 2259, Turin, the Emperor of the Centauri Republic, arrives on the station for a goodwill tour. Delenn is one of the ambassadors gathered at the reception to formally welcome him. Unfortunately, before he can arrive at this reception, Turin suffers a major heart attack that leaves him near death. In the vacuum created by his impending death, factions within the Centauri Republic launch an attack on Quadrant 14, a Narn colony, conquering it completely. As a result, the Narn regime officially declares war against the Republic, starting the Narn-Centauri War. Turin dies a few hours later. That same day, Delenn receives a message from Jeffrey Sinclair, who is now acting as the leader of the Rangers on Minbar, training them for the upcoming Shadow War. He puts the Rangers operating out of Babylon 5 under Delenn's authority and alerts her to the latest information that they have been able to uncover about the Shadows. He may have also told her that he informed Garibaldi about their presence, though he did not explain the full story about the Shadows to him. Soon afterwards, Earth Force sends a large division of Marines to the station, allegedly on their way to Io. Delenn is annoyed at the presence of such a large force of fighting men on a station dedicated to peace and neutrality. She maintains hope that the Council can still mediate the hostilities between the Narn and Centauri, though she does not admit her doubts whether such a thing now is possible. Her latest attempts at negotiations have been a complete failure, as both Jakar and Londo refuse to speak to each other. A few Marines, having had too much to drink, harass and then threaten violence towards Delenn. She is saved by a Marine named Dodger, and quickly alerts Michael Garibaldi. She is happy when the division moves out a few days later. And we'll be right back after this. Midway through the year, Delenn is recalled to the Great Council to stand in judgment. Lanier insists on accompanying her despite her warnings that in doing so he risks future repercussions. After arriving aboard the Great Council's ship, she is informed that she has been stripped of her title of Satai, cast out from among the Nine, allowed to appear before them to ask about her assignment as ambassador to Babylon 5. She is shocked to learn that Neroon has replaced her, giving the warrior caste an unprecedented advantage in the council. Narun angrily tells her that it was the warriors cast right as they fought and died in the war against Earth, only to have it end in surrender, scoffing at the notion that humans are being born with Minbari souls. Despite their displeasure with her, the council allows her to stay as the Minbari representative on Babylon 5. Narun, in particular, believes that it is where she belongs, claiming that she no longer has a home among either the Minbari or the humans. On her way back to the station, Delenn learns that Captain Sheridan has been kidnapped by a strange alien race. Delenn is able to identify the aliens as the Streb, and gives Commander Ivanova coordinates to their homeworld. She then accompanies an assault led by Sheridan's old command, the destroyer EAS Agamemnon, which successfully rescues the captain. As the Narn Centauri war heats up, G'Kar relates stories of Centauri atrocities, particularly their targeting of civilian vessels. He appeals to the Minbari Federation for assistance. Delenn is troubled by the reports, but points out that G'Kar many times vowed never to rest until all Centauri were wiped out. He understands that his actions made it difficult to ask for help, but offers to beg if that's what he has to do. Delenn tells him that her people are tired of fighting, tired of wars, and that they will not be dragged into another one. She offers to do what she can to bring political pressure upon the Centauri, but G'Kar states it is far too late for that. That same day, Sheridan approaches Delenn with an alternative means to assist them. He suggests pooling their resources to bring in food and medical supplies to the Narn territories, then smuggle out refugees. Delenn agrees to help, and they explain the plan to G'Kar, who is grateful, but is now convinced that his people are fighting a losing war. A few hours later, Sheridan shoots and kills a Minbari warrior on the station. Another Minbari witness, Ashen, claims that Sheridan gunned him down in cold blood after the warrior offered to surrender. Delenn and Lanier attempt to question Ashen about his claims, but he refuses to speak with Delenn, calling her a freak. Delenn cannot believe that Sheridan is capable of cold-blooded murder, but is not ready to believe Ashen would tell a lie, as that is a serious taboo in Minbari culture that would blacken his entire clan. As Delenn prepares the dead warrior to be sent back, she discovers that both he and Ashen are of the same clan, the third Fane of Chodomo, the same clan as Lanier's. They both realize Ashen is lying to save his clan's honor, the one thing that would compel him to lie. The Federation soon requests that Ashen be sent back to Minbar. Without his presence for Sheridan to rebuke, he knows his credibility will be shattered forever. He asks Delenn for help, and she agrees to give it. They set up Ashen to confess the truth. The clan elders set up a plot to frame Sheridan, resentful that a man who had killed so many of their relatives on board the Drela Phi during the war had been given command of the station. A grateful Sheridan makes a deal with Delenn to prevent Lanier and his entire clan from being disgraced. If Ashen admits the truth of the attack, Sheridan will not make him disclose the details behind it. Delenn happily accepts. When an ISN film crew comes aboard for a special segment, Delenn agrees to an interview. When Cynthia Torkman asks her some rather pointed questions about her transformation, Delenn is overwhelmed by the experience and breaks down in tears. She does, however, do a brief follow-up when asked simply if Babylon 5 is worth it, to which she empathically responds, yes. She explains that humans are the only ones capable of successfully maintaining such a station. While she has found this interview unsettling, Delenn does come to appreciate Earth news outlets to an extent, particularly a section in the universe today called Ion Minbari, which often has some interesting stories that she has not been privy to directly from her people. And we'll be right back after this. Kosh comes to Delenn and alerts her that Sheridan has detained Morden, who they both know is an agent of the Shadows. They go to see Sheridan and insist that Morden be released immediately. Sheridan, seeking to find out what had happened to his wife, refuses to cater to their request without an explanation. Kosh agrees, and they head to Delenn's quarters. She reveals what she knows about the Shadows. She tells about the last Great Shadow War 10,000 years before, the Great War 1,000 years ago, and the inevitable Second Shadow War that looms. She explains about the first ones and the Vorlons are the last of them, aside from the Shadows. Kosh then reveals to Sheridan the truth about the Icarus, his wife's ship. The ship arrived on Zahadum, awakening a few hibernating Shadows. Those who would not serve them, like Morden, were killed. Delenn then tells Sheridan that Morden is always in the presence of one or more of the Shadows, who can be invisible. And if Sheridan persists in keeping Morden locked up, the Shadows will have to reveal themselves. She explains that the one advantage the Side of Light has is that the Shadows do not know that they are aware of them, an advantage they will need if they have any hope. A pained Sheridan agrees to cut Morden loose, but goes to Kosh and insists he teach him how to fight and beat the Shadows. What Delenn does not tell Sheridan is that she knows it is possible for Sheridan's wife Anna to still be alive on Zahadum. She withholds this because she knows that if he believes that it was even possible she was alive, he would go there immediately to find her. Not long afterwards, Delenn decides to invite Sheridan over for a traditional Minbari meal. She asks Lanier to prepare it, and given a guest of Sheridan's stature, the rituals required have him cook and prepare it for 2 days straight. Sheridan is happy to join them for the meal, but during one of the meditation periods, he dozes off. He is alerted by CNC of a problem involving the Marcab transport, and has to leave before finishing. But luckily, all the rituals had been completed, so Lanier did not have to do it again. The situation with the Marcab transport is far worse than anyone could have imagined. A deadly plague known as Drafa has swept across the Marcab people, striking down young and old. The Marcab believe the disease only strikes the impure, so their ambassador persuades all 2,000 of them to seal themselves into a remote area on the station. While Dr. Franklin and his staff try desperately to find a cure, Delenn and Lanier decide to administer to the Marcabs, who are all terrified over the plight. She goes to Sheridan and personally makes the request to be sealed in with the Marcabs. Sheridan at first refuses, as they still don't know if the disease can affect non-Marcabs. Delenn insists and Sheridan gives in, saddened to think she may not walk out. Delenn and Lanier enter the quarantined area and offer what comfort they can to the Marcab people. Unfortunately, the Marcab confining themselves together in one place only helps spread the disease faster. Delenn and Lanier have to watch as every single one dies before their eyes. Franklin discovers a cure, but it's too late to save a single one. Sheridan comforts Delenn, overwhelmed with grief over the great tragedy. In October, Delenn is contacted by Lita Alexander, who is back on the station. Lita asks Delenn to accompany her in approaching the command staff, as she expressed that she does not trust them individually. Delenn honors her request, not inquiring further about what has Lita so suspicious. She also shares another tender moment with Sheridan, after a bit of confusion over some gaps in her vocabulary, and they both realize that they are developing feelings for one another. In the final days of the Narn Centauri War, Delenn is contacted by Drawl via the Great Machine. He invites her and Sheridan to come to Epsilon 3 for a visit. The machine has restored his youth and vigor. Sheridan and Delenn journey down to the planet. Drawl greets them and offers them the services of the Great Machine in the upcoming war. During their meeting, he is alerted to a distress call and tells them that they are needed back on the station. The Centauri had begun orbital bombardment of Narn itself. When the news breaks on the station, mass riots erupt. Sheridan has a security team escort Delenn back to her quarters. 4 days later, Londo Mollari calls a session of the Babylon 5 Advisory Council and the League of Non-Aligned Worlds, announcing that the Narn regime has offered complete and unconditional surrender to the Centauri Republic. As one of the terms of the surrender, Londo insists that Jakar, now stripped of his rank, return to Narn for trial. Sheridan announces that Jakar has requested sanctuary on the station, and that he has granted it. Delenn announces that the Minbari Federation will support Sheridan's decision. However, neither she nor Sheridan are able to prevent Mollari from having Jakar removed from the Advisory Council and barred from future League sessions. Afterwards, Delenn, Kosh, and Michael Garibaldi introduce Sheridan to the Rangers. Delenn transfers joint control of the Rangers in that area to Sheridan. Kosh, however, has concerns regarding Delenn. He wants to ensure that she is indeed the right person in the right place at the right time. He insists that she submit to an inquisitor, and that her life will depend on her passing his tests. She approaches Sheridan and requests that an isolated area be sealed off for the test, and that the inquisitor be allowed to come aboard without any trouble. Sheridan is uneasy, not completely understanding why Kosh has made the request, but agrees to go along with it. After the inquisitor comes aboard and is ready for her, she goes alone to face her test, unsure if she will walk out alive. The inquisitor has Delenn put a pain giver on, using them to bring her pain for incorrect answers. However, he only really asks one question: who are you? Delenn struggles to find the answer he seeks, but is unable to satisfy him. After several hours of torturous questioning, he briefly leaves her just as Lanier comes in looking for her. He tries to get her to leave, but she insists that she must see it through to the end. Lanier then goes and alerts Sheridan, who comes alone to find her. The Inquisitor seizes Sheridan and begins torturing him. Seeing this, Delenn confronts him, telling him to return his attentions to her. He asks if she is willing to die for him, and she replies that life is her cause, that one life or a billion is the same. The Inquisitor is pleased, allowing them both to leave and telling them that they are indeed the right people. Stirred on by their victories, the Centauri Republic soon begin a series of violent campaigns against several of its neighbors. When Sheridan offers sanctuary to a Narn heavy cruiser, a firefight erupts outside the station, involving a Centauri battlecruiser. The Centauri ship is destroyed, but the Earth Alliance insists Sheridan offer a formal apology in the gardens before a host of ambassadors and others. Delenn and Kosh wait in one of the isolated corners of the Zen garden, but suddenly the core shuttle carrying Sheridan explodes. He manages to dive out, but is falling too quickly for anyone to rescue him. Delenn appeals to Kosh, asking him to save Sheridan. Kosh complies, stepping out of his encounter suit and revealing himself as a being of light to all assembled. He flies up and rescues Sheridan. Afterwards, Delenn explains to Sheridan that the Vorlons have been visiting the younger races for many thousands of years, arguably manipulating them so they will respond favorably when they see them. Kosh only appeared to some, not all of those in the garden, however. Delenn warns Sheridan that his appearance will be an alarm to the Shadows, but it was a risk that they had to take. Working in secret with the Rangers, Delenn was involved with the construction of a new class of Minbari ship, the White Star. This revolutionary design was compact, powerful, faster than almost anything in normal space, and could open its own jump point. In early 2260, a member of Earth Force Special Alliance named David and Dowie arrived on the station, seeking information about a few seconds of video that captured a shadow vessel. He asked Delenn and Captain Sheridan if they can identify it. Delenn offers a half-truth. She has never actually seen one until that moment, even though she does know exactly what it is. At the same time, a ranger named Marcus Cole slipped aboard Babylon 5, pursued by mercenaries working for the Shadows. Marcus contacted Delenn through Lanier and asked to meet her in Down Below. After proving his identity, he warned her of a Centauri blockade around a Drazi colony world where many rangers had been sent for training. As they left Down Below, the three of them were attacked by mercenaries after Marcus, but they managed to fight him off. Delenn and Marcus asked Sheridan to help lift the blockade so the Rangers may escape. Sheridan and Ivanova come with them in a shuttle to a place where the White Star is waiting. Once aboard, Delenn offers the vessel to Sheridan and explains its many features. An elated Sheridan orders them to head for the colony as fast as they can. Once they arrive, they discover that all the Centauri ships are gone, but a powerful system of orbital satellites maintain the blockade. The White Star easily shoots down enough of them to allow the Rangers to escape the planet. However, a shadow vessel jumps into local space and attacks. And we'll be right back after this. Delenn is fearful of the shadow vessel, sure that the White Star cannot oppose it directly. Sheridan orders the ship to flee, using the local jump gate to hide the fact that the White Star can form its own jump point. The shadow ship follows them into hyperspace. Once they arrive at the Markab homeworld, Sheridan orders them to exit through the jump gate, then opens a jump gate inside the gate. The maneuver destroys the gate in a massive explosion that wipes out the shadow vessel along with it. Once back on Babylon 5, Delenn covers for Sheridan, saying his absence was a result of his assistance in helping a Minbari diplomatic shuttle that had been in distress. Once Dowie leaves, Sheridan calls his senior staff together to give them the whole story about the shadows and the oncoming war. Delenn explains the full history of the last Great War and what must be done to save the future. A few days later, Delenn arrives for Minbar to continue her work for preparing for the war. Upon her return, a bomb explodes in the customs area just as she embarked. Lanier, there to meet her, saves her and Ambassador Malari from the explosion, but is severely wounded in the process. He is rushed to Med Lab, where Delenn stays with him for a time, upset over the incident. The bombing was one of a series by an insane bomber. Sheridan and Mr. Garibaldi eventually are able to find and arrest the bomber. Lanier awakens in Med Lab while Delenn is visiting him. He eventually makes a full recovery. Soon thereafter, Londo comes to visit Delenn. Their relationship is now icy at best, but Londo asks her for a favor, recalling the time when he helped her and Drawl. He quickly explains that the favor is not for himself but for his aide, Vir Kato. Londo thinks Vir would be the perfect person to send to the currently defunct Centauri embassy on Minbar. Delenn asks why he is doing this for Vir, and Londo quietly says that he is very fond of his assistant and thinks it would be far better for him to be away from what is coming. However, when Delenn suggests that Londo needs Vir, he coldly rejects any such sentiment. Delenn agrees to the request, and soon Vir is on his way to Minbar. A group of human monks led by Brother Theo establishes themselves on Babylon 5 in an effort to learn more about alien beliefs and religions. As true seekers, they are welcomed cordially by Delenn and Lanier, who agree to talk with them about Minbari beliefs. A monk named Brother Edward is one sent to talk with them, but is tragically killed soon thereafter. Delenn and Sheridan's newly formed war council begins meeting regularly. Drawl begins attending with them. The two of them talk to the others about the first ones, how they were important in the last war, and how, if any remain, they would be instrumental in turning the tides against the shadows. The council agrees that they must try to find them however possible. Working with Drawl, Ivanova is able to locate the walkers of Sigma 957 and manages to convince them to stand when the time comes. At the next meeting of the council, Sheridan warns them that Alfred Bester, a human telepath, is coming to the station. Sheridan and the others explain to Delenn that they do not trust him not to scan them, which would unearth everything that they've been working for in secret. Delenn offers the use of a team of telepaths to block Bester from trying anything until they convince him to take the Sleepers, a drug that inhibits his abilities, while on the station. They are all grateful when he departs, after helping bust open an illegal drug smuggling ring. Working with the Rangers, Michael Garibaldi arranges for a former member of the IPX, Dr. Kirkish, to come aboard Babylon 5. She tells about a shadow vessel that was found on Mars a few years ago. That ship was recovered by another shadow vessel, and Kirkish was reassigned, ordered not to say anything to anyone about what she had seen. Recently, however, another ship was discovered on Ganymede. Earth Force was planning on reactivating the ship within a week. After making arrangements for Kirkish to go to Minbari space for her safety, Delenn and Sheridan form a desperate plan to destroy the shadow vessel before it can come online. Leaving his uniform and all identification behind, Sheridan captains the White Star with Delenn and Lanier on a mission towards Earth. As they head through hyperspace, Delenn and Sheridan enjoy some time together in the crew quarters. As Sheridan is unused to sleeping on Minbari beds, Delenn tells him that she will watch and catch him should he fall. When they arrive in Earth space, the White Star jumps in near Ganymede and quickly heads for the site where the vessel is being experimented upon. They pick up a transmission that someone is about to enter the ship. Delenn explains to Sheridan that the shadow ships are using living beings as their central processing systems, and warns that whomever is going inside is not prepared. They arrive at the moon too late, as the shadow ship becomes fully operational and destroys a facility where it is being held before rising above the moon. They realize that the ship is insane as the merger did not go as it was supposed to. Sheridan orders the White Star to attack it, and while they do not cause any significant damage, they do get it to follow them. The White Star flies into Jupiter, with the vessel in pursuit, far enough inside the gas giant for the shadow ship to be trapped by the gravity well and to be destroyed. As they prepare to exit the planet, however, the EAS Agamemnon turns up and orders their surrender. Delenn suggests opening up a jump point while still inside the atmosphere. A risky move, but one that allows them to escape. ISN reports the incident as an unknown alien ship being destroyed after launching an unprovoked attack on the colony. That same day, EA President Morgan Clark uses the incident as an excuse to declare martial law. And we'll be right back after this. Chaos and all-out war follow in the ensuing weeks. A badly injured ranger arrives on the station, warning about the pilots of the Shadows coming to fruition. He explains to Delenn that the Shadows have made alliances with half of the members of the League of Non-Aligned Worlds, convincing them to accept their protection against the might of the Centauri Republic. But, once allied with a force so powerful, they were then seduced into going into war for conquest with their neighbors. Asking how the Grey Council has responded to this news, the Rangers mournfully relate, "The Council has declared that the problems of others are not our concern." Outraged over their complacency, Delenn leaves Babylon 5, heading directly for the Grey Council's ship. Despite messages that they will refuse to see her, Delenn boards the ship and marches right into their chamber, chiding them for standing idly by while chaos and destruction threatens the entire galaxy. She reminds them of her often repeated warnings and how they dismissed them. Accusing them of pride and breaking their covenant with Delenn, Delenn seizes the leadership staff and snaps it in two, declaring that the council is broken, as Delenn himself prophesied years ago. If the warrior caste would not act, then the other castes will. She then leads the representatives of the religious and worker classes out of the chamber, preparing to do what is necessary to win the war against the Shadows. Back at Babylon 5, the station declared independence from the Earth Alliance in protest over the illegal actions conducted by President Clark. This action led directly for the battle for Babylon 5 independence. After the initial task force sent by Clark is destroyed, a second wave force arrives, one that will overwhelm the station's defenses. Delenn leads the White Star and 3 Charlin-class Minbari war cruisers to the station. She declares that Babylon 5 is under the protection of the Minbari, and if the task force does not withdraw, it will be destroyed. The Earth vessels quickly withdraw. Delenn comes aboard the station and is met by Sheridan in the customs area, who thanks her for the rescue. Given everything that has happened, Delenn decides the time is right for the Minbari rebirth ceremony. To everyone's surprise, including his own, Londo Mollari is the first person she thinks of to invite. Londo rebuffs her offer, however, as does Jakar, who claims he is too busy. Delenn notices Marcus Cole is uncomfortable with the notion of the ceremony, and she talks to him about it. Marcus explains that he does not want to go to the ceremony because a person is required to give up something, and he has nothing left to give. Delenn points out that he still retains his guilt for living while his brother and so many others died. Marcus considers this before leaving her in the customs area. Delenn was there to meet with the Minbari captain of one of the Minbari ships now stationed in a permanent protective position at the station. Unfortunately, as soon as he comes aboard, they are both kidnapped by Boggs and some other humans that are still loyal to Nightwatch and President Clark. Delenn is forced to watch as Boggs' agent murders a member of the captain's crew. Sheridan, Garibaldi, and a security team are able to rescue them. But during the subsequent fight, Delenn steps in front of a knife being thrown at Sheridan. The injury is not life-threatening, but will prevent her from conducting the rebirth ceremony. To compensate, Sheridan, Garibaldi, Franklin, and Ivanova all visit her in a med lab. They all offer a secret that they had never told to anyone. Afterwards, Lanier surprises them with new uniforms, something Delenn had ordered him to make shortly after she first thought of holding the ceremony. The station would enjoy only a brief break in the action. Delenn and Sheridan took advantage of the opportunity by having another dinner date, their feelings becoming ever stronger, though they were interrupted twice. With some help from Bester, Sheridan is able to capture a transport vessel being used to deliver modified human telepaths to the Shadows. Garibaldi calls the War Council together and they realize that the telepaths can be used to disrupt shadow vessels. Just as they realize that they had found a crippling Achilles heel to the ancient race, word comes in that the Shadows are no longer hiding. They are attacking races openly. While Sheridan was away securing the transport, Delenn took up the task of bringing G'Kar into the War Council, which meant explaining everything she and the Grey Council knew and had held back about the Shadows, including their apparent aid to the Centauri during the Narn-Centauri War. Tearfully, she asked G'Kar to understand that her silence meant the difference between millions of dead and billions of dead, of whole planets. G'Kar, no longer filled with rage that once drove him, sorrowfully conceded her point. Delenn remains hopeful that one day he will be able to forgive her. Over the next few weeks, Sheridan and his crew do what they can to pull together the other races to make a stand against the Shadows. All the races are terrified, and the Centauri and Earth Alliance are effectively sitting by. Delenn has complete confidence in Sheridan. Sure, he will work out a solution to bringing everything together. Realizing that only a major victory will sway the races to band together, Sheridan asks Kosh to arrange for a Vorlon fleet to engage the Shadows. Kosh initially refuses, but agrees when Sheridan persists. As a result, a Shadow battle group is destroyed by a Vorlon armada, but Kosh is murdered in his quarters in retaliation. The Vorlon Empire contacts Delenn, aware of Kosh's death almost instantly, and relay instructions for dealing with his final remains. Delenn and Sheridan agree to keep the news of his death secret from everyone to keep morale up. Valen's prophecies, always somewhat cryptic, become perfectly clear when Delenn receives a letter from Valen himself. Once carefully preserved for over 900 years, she understood the responsibility but still troubled by the contents. The letter confirmed that Jeffrey Sinclair not only had Valen's soul, but was destined to become Valen himself. One of the surviving records from the Great War told the tide of battle had turned against the side of light late in the war, and the greatest Minbari starbase was destroyed by the Shadows. Without a long base of operation, the war would have been lost or ended in stalemate, and the Shadows would have had 3 times as many ships for the Second Shadow War. However, a replacement suddenly arrived, Babylon 4. Drawl confirms that the Great Machine is capable of operating the Time Rift in Sector 14, and that 6 years prior it was the White Star that had stole the station. Delenn recruits Sheridan, Ivanova, and Marcus to come with her to make the theft history. They are joined by Sinclair just before they leave the station, but neither he nor Delenn disclose the truth of what is to come. They are also accompanied by Zathras from Epsilon 3. Problems quickly occur on the mission. Zathras gave them all a time stabilizer to protect them from the effects of the Time Rift. Unfortunately, Sheridan's is damaged shortly after arriving in 2254, and he is pulled through time. He reappears while the others are doing what they need to pull Babylon 4, which includes stepping onto the station. While there, the time distortion causes them to experience time flashes, where they can see a moment from their past or future. Delenn sees a vision of herself watching Sheridan sleep when someone walks in on them, causing her to drop a snow globe that she had been holding. When Sheridan disappears and reappears again, Delenn gives him her own stabilizer, causing herself to be pulled through time briefly. Though Zathras is able to repair Sheridan's stabilizer and give it to her, ultimately the mission is successful. Sinclair declares his intentions to stay on board and pilot the station into the past. The others reluctantly leave without him. En route back to the station, Delenn explains Sinclair's true destiny, and how her own physical transformation mirrors one Sinclair will undergo once in the distant past to become a Minbari. And we'll be right back after this. The One Who Is. Desiring to test the theories regarding the Shadows and the telepaths, the War Council decides to engage a single Shadow vessel using the White Star, with Lita Alexander as a telepath. Delenn pledges to send a Minbari warcruiser along with 3 Minbari telepaths to wait in hyperspace should the White Star need assistance. None of the other races volunteer to send ships. Jakar offers to have the Jatong go along, but the captain refuses. The White Star successfully engages the shadow vessel. Lita is able to stun the ship telepathically while the White Star takes it out. Unfortunately, it got off a distress signal, prompting 4 more shadow vessels to jump into local space. Fortunately, between the Minbari ship and the unexpected reinforcements, including the Chatak, the Shadow Force is defeated, prompting the first real victory of the war without the aid of the Vorlons. The Alliance quickly begins recruiting telepaths and sending them to help defend against the enemy. After the White Star returns, Delenn leaves Minbar to attend to the void left by Jeffrey Sinclair. Wraithen insists that Delenn is the natural choice to succeed Sinclair as the leader of the Rangers. Delenn reluctantly agrees to accept the position. While conceding that it is a logical choice, she is forced to admit it will not be the most popular choice in some circles. Wraithen comes back with her to Babylon 5 to hold the installation ceremony there. Sheridan congratulates her, agreeing that she is the best choice. However, Naroon has also followed her back to the station. Confronting her privately, he accuses her of attempting to usurp power to become the absolute ruler of the Minbari people. Denying the accusation, she also refuses his demand that she turn over control of the Rangers to the warrior class. Naroon leaves, but swears he will not stop at any cost. Delenn confides in Lanier about what had happened, but insists that they keep the matter a private one and not alert Sheridan. Lanier agrees, but secretly goes to Marcus Cole and explains the situation. The installation ceremony goes forward as Marcus successfully delays Naroon until the final moments of it. Naroon enters the chamber just before the ceremony is finished, but concedes that she is the only one fit to lead the Rangers. Afterwards, Delenn and Lanier visit Marcus in the med lab. They are surprised when Naroon visits Marcus to acknowledge that his intent was wrong and that he had been short-sighted. As the shadow attacks begin to escalate, Delenn worries that Sheridan is not taking proper care of himself, as he spends most of his time in the war room. When a delegation from Earth that secreted classified information about the situation there arrives, Delenn insists that they join the delegation for dinner. Afterwards, one of the members of the delegation, Reverend William Dexter, tells Delenn he thinks Sheridan has been working too hard and is exerting himself beyond exhaustion. The next day, Sheridan asks Delenn to join him in the war room to try to find a pattern to the shadow attacks. After hours of fruitless guessing, a frustrated Delenn apologizes for not being able to figure it out. Sheridan tells her it was just as good to have the company. Minutes later, they figure out the Shadow's strategy, that they are driving many refugees towards a particular sector of space, planning to destroy them all in one big strike. When Sheridan mentions that it is what he would do if he were the bad guys, Delenn realizes Reverend Dexter's assessment was correct, and insists that he takes a few hours off. She has him come with her to a prayer service Dexter has at his church. Afterwards, Delenn takes Sheridan aboard the White Star to surprise him. She presents an entire armada of White Stars, explaining that the Minbari had been working on them around the clock to get them ready. Now they are prepared as they will ever be. The two share a moment with a kiss. Once back on Babylon 5, Sheridan begins making battle plans while Delenn approaches the remainder of the League of Non-Aligned Worlds. She asks them to commit as many ships as they can to a strike force, though she withholds the details of the mission, angering many of the ambassadors. She stresses this as security is necessary and points out that the Alliance has kept every promise it had made so far. A few hours later, the League agrees to her request. While Delenn and Sheridan wait for word from Ivanova and Marcus, they enjoy a few minutes together. Delenn explains about a Minbari custom where a couple share 3 nights together. The male sleeps while the female watches to see his true face. She asks that they share such a night if they return from battle. They then board a Minbari warcruiser so that they can use the holographic display room of the vessel to coordinate the battle. Soon enough, the signal comes in from the White Star. The Army of Light jumps in from their holding positions in hyperspace and engage the Shadows in the Battle of Sector 83. The battle is won and the Shadows are turned back, but at a heavy cost. For every one shadow vessel destroyed, 2 Alliance ships were destroyed. The wounded and dying are taken back to Babylon 5 for treatment. Sheridan confers with Delenn and Ivanova, wondering when the shadows might strike Babylon 5 itself. He also confides in them about a cryptic dream Kosh sent him 6 months earlier. They spend a few minutes trying to decipher its meaning before Sheridan brushes it off. That night, Delenn watches Sheridan sleep, beholding his true face. She finds a snow globe and picks it up to look at it. As she does, the door opens and a woman enters, announcing that she is Anna Sheridan, John's wife. Delenn drops the snow globe in shock. Delenn quickly excuses herself, shocked and upset over the turn of events. After taking Anna and having Dr. Franklin examine her, confirming she seems to be who she claims, Sheridan confronts Delenn privately. He angrily asks why she withheld the possibility that Anna could still be alive. Delenn admits the truth. She and Kosh withheld the information because they knew Sheridan might try to go after her. Before John walks out, Delenn tells him she loves him, begging him to believe her. Begging him to believe that, even if he never believes anything else she says. A few hours later, a time-delayed message from Sheridan comes to Delenn. In the message, Sheridan explains what he had seen when they were in the time rift with Babylon 4, that he had jumped forward in time for a few minutes, and that they had won the Shadow War but at a high cost. And the future Delenn warned him both that the future could not be changed and that he must not go to Zahadum. Sheridan explains that he has indeed gone to Zahadum with Anna, despite knowing it must be a trap, because he is hoping to end the Shadow War in doing so. He ends the message by telling her that he loves her. Overcome with grief, Delenn breaks down in tears.
The end of an age. Rumors soon reached the station that Sheridan died on Zahadum, crashing the White Star into the planet, detonating 2 thermonuclear bombs on impact. For the next week, the Shadows stopped all their attacks. Without their attacks and without Sheridan's driving presence, the Alliance quickly began to unravel. Delenn, Ivanova, and the others are unable to convince the Alliance worlds to maintain their ships in defense of the station, or to launch an attack on Zahadum itself. Angry that the Vorlon ambassador had been ignoring her summons, Delenn insists on meeting with him. The Vorlon meets her in the Zen garden with Lita Alexander. Delenn asks him to add his voice to hers so that they can put together an expedition to Zahadum. The new Vorlon ambassador refuses, saying that Sheridan is no longer important, and that the Vorlons will do what is required on their own. Afterwards, Lita meets with Ivanova and the others to go along to Zahadum, sure that she can use her telepathy to scan for Sheridan and to keep the Shadows distracted. Ivanova and Delenn command the White Star to the Shadows' homeworld. Lita is unable to keep the Shadows occupied for long, and the Great Eye communicates to all on board the ship, speaking to each in the voice of their respective fathers. Luckily, Lanier's preparations allow them to escape, but there's no trace of Sheridan at all. Delenn's sorrow nearly consumes her. Ever since Sheridan left, she began fasting and praying almost non-stop for Sheridan. She maintained hope of his survival after the others were convinced it was impossible. 9 days after his disappearance, Lanier asked Dr. Franklin to speak to her about her fasting. Franklin warns Delenn that while Minbari can normally fast for up to 2 weeks, she is no longer completely Minbari, and her extended fast is starting to harm her. Delenn, however, vows to continue it until she sees Sheridan again. Later, while going through Sheridan's personal effects, Dr. Franklin finds a journal entry Sheridan made 6 months earlier. He decides to share it with Delenn. It was made just after the battle for Babylon 5 independence, and in it, John admits that he is falling in love with Delenn. Emboldened by John's courage, Delenn assembles the Rangers and an entire White Star fleet at Babylon 5. She relays her decision to launch an all-out attack on Zahadum in 1 week. After they gather what strength they can, even if such an attack is a suicide run, the Rangers vow to follow her, even to their deaths. And we'll be right back after this. On the same day Sheridan left for Zahadum, Michael Garibaldi went missing while on patrol in a Star Fury. After a few days, Jakar had gone looking for him, and Marcus Cole immediately then went looking for Jakar. Marcus found him, and together they found a lead on Garibaldi's whereabouts. But Jakar asked Marcus to return to Babylon 5 while he continues on his own. The lead allows Zach Allen to discover Garibaldi is being carried in a transport not too far from the station. With Ivanova away from the station searching for the first ones in a White Star, Delenn is effectively in command of Babylon 5. She authorized Zach to take a squadron and recover Garibaldi. The squadron successfully rescues him and brings him unconscious back to the station for recovery. Meanwhile, word of Delenn's war plans create minor uproar among many of the other races' representatives. She learns from the Bukhari ambassador that several of the other ambassadors are planning an assembly in the Zocalo to protest her actions, believing that they will only stir up the shadows and lead to more suffering. Delenn refuses to quash the demonstration, though she does insist on showing up to it to defend her actions. The crowd grows restless and angry by her presence, but all fall silent when Captain Sheridan enters the room. From a platform, he explains that he has returned from Zahadum, a feat everyone said was impossible, and that he knows that the shadows can be defeated once and for all. He calls on everyone to stand with them so they can at last have a victory. All who are present agree to fight by his side. Delenn quickly comes to his side, and the two embrace. Sheridan returned to the station with the help of a mysterious being named Lorien. Sheridan explains to Delenn, Lanier, Franklin, and now an awakened Garibaldi what he learned on Zahadum. The Vorlons are not caught up in a war with the Shadows in a conventional sense, but rather they and the Shadows are two sides of an equation. Both remained behind after most of the remaining First Ones left the galaxy to shepherd and guide the younger races, but their ideologies were diametrically opposed. While at first respectful, they eventually came to blows, beginning a long series of conflicts. As they are talking, Ivanova and Marcus return from their trip with dire news. The Vorlons have amassed a massive armada of several thousand ships, including a couple which are several miles long and capable of destroying entire planets. And they have decided to wipe out anything and anyone who they deemed as being touched by the Shadows. As the Army of Light continues to gather its forces to stand against both the Vorlons and the Shadows, Sheridan raises the point that the Vorlon ambassador must be removed from the station, as he poses a serious security risk. Working with Lorien, Lita Alexander, and station security, Sheridan is able to lure the Vorlon into an attack. Delenn insists on going to the area where the trap is set. The new Vorlon ambassador is driven from his encounter suit and tries to attack Delenn. Sheridan comes between them, and with Lorien's help, part of Kosh that was inside of him expels itself and attacks the new Vorlon ambassador, leading to the destruction of both. Sheridan is left near dead for a second time, but once again Lorien revives him, though mentions it's only for a while. Afterwards, Sheridan meets with Delenn privately to explain that Lorien's gift has a drawback. It will only keep him alive for 20 years, no more. Delenn is crushed by the news, but Sheridan brushes it aside. He produces an engagement ring and asks her to marry him, desiring to spend what time he has with her. Delenn joyfully accepts the proposal. The Shadows soon reveal a planet killer of their own, a death cloud destroying entire worlds, just the same as the Vorlons. Lanier deduces that the Vorlons are on a course that will lead them to Coriana 6, a low-tech world with a shadow outpost and 6 billion inhabitants. Sheridan and the War Council realize that they will have to make a stand at Coriana 6, but Sheridan insists that the Shadows must be there. He wants both sides to confront each other. He contacts a White Star, ordering them to allow themselves to be set upon by a Shadow Armada, so that information can be recovered by the Shadows that will lure them to Coriana 6, a task that will only be successful if the White Star allows itself to be destroyed. The crew readily accepts this assignment, bidding farewell to Delenn and Sheridan before successfully going out on the mission. Finally, Delenn and Sheridan on board the White Star 2 lead a fleet of thousands of ships from dozens of worlds to Coriana 6. Along the way, Commander Ivanova contacts them to let them know that she has recently returned to the station after another mission to find the First Ones, this time with Lorien helping her. It was successful. Delenn points out to Sheridan that one ship will not make much of a difference and Ivanova does not have to be in that battle. Sheridan insists on telling her to come, as he promised her he would not leave her behind. Soon afterwards, the Battle of Coriana 6 commences. As the Vorlons and the Shadows face off with all the younger races in between, their bitterness and zealotry shine through. The Vorlons telepathically communicate with Sheridan, while the Shadows do the same with Delenn. Both armies appeal to Sheridan and Delenn, telling them that there was no choice but to embrace them and oppose their opposites. However, Lorien uses his powers to allow everyone aboard all younger race ships to see what Delenn and Sheridan saw before pulling them back. The Shadows and Vorlons make one last final appeal, but Sheridan steadfastly refuses both of them. With all his allies standing with him, Lorien explains to the two ancient forces that their task is done, and it is time to depart. Along with the last of the first ones, they all leave the galaxy forever, leaving it to the younger races. The fleet heads home. Delenn and Sheridan enjoy a quiet trip back to Babylon 5, reflecting on how the Third Age has begun. An age where they can at long last stop being afraid of shadows. Despite the Shadow War being over, there was still much work to be done. The Earth Alliance Civil War was still ongoing, and President Morgan Clark declared an embargo on Babylon 5. In addition to the embargo, Clark uses ISN as his personal propaganda machine to slander the station. An ISN crew comes to the station and pleads that they wish to only report the truth. Sheridan and Delenn consent to an interview where they are asked extensively about their relationship, but nothing too offensive. Once the interview airs, however, it is heavily edited to make it appear that Sheridan and Delenn have designs to ultimately conquer Earth. And we'll be right back after this. Delenn faced continued resentment from not only humans but from their own people as well. Once they were aware of her intentions to marry Sheridan, Delenn's clan sent a representative to the station to insist that she come back so they could evaluate the relationship and whether or not they could consent to it. Loyal to her clan and to her people's beliefs, Delenn agreed to go back to Minbar, well aware that if the judgment went against her, it would be the end of her relationship with John. She asked for one final night with him, though she did not explain anything other than the need to return home. Delenn did ask John if they could spend the night together, her third night watching his true face. John agreed, though he sensed something was amiss. Delenn returned to Minbar, where she was called before her clan. They professed concern that she was a threat to Minbari purity by choosing an alien as her mate. They questioned her motives and demanded that she take part in the dreaming, an ancient Minbari ritual where part of a person's memories could be shown to them. The dreaming showed Delenn the days when she met Dukat and first became his aide. She also saw his death and the beginning of the Earth-Minbari War. Delenn was confused at why she was being shown this, until she realized the dreaming wanted her to hear the final words that Dukat said to her, which she could not hear clearly at the time because of her grief. Dukat told her that she was a child of Valen. Delenn and Lanier are subsequently able to piece together that after defeating the Shadows 1,000 years before, Valen, still partly human, married and had children. Her clan elder admits that Valen's descendants now are too numerous to count. This is also the reason why Minbari and humans share souls. Delenn plans on exposing this truth, but fearful that the upheaval it would cause. Her clan elder asks her to keep it hidden and fabricate a story that will allow her to remain with John. Delenn agrees and returns to Babylon 5. John is waiting for her at the docking bay. Shortly after her return, Delenn approaches John and informs him of another tradition she wants for them to observe. While at first exasperated at the thought of yet another tradition, John's attitude changes when she explains that this particular one involves them spending a night discovering each other's sources of pleasure. However, once John discovers it involves several Minbaris, including Lanier, praying in the next room, as well as standing guard should anything become too rough, John is quite put out. She convinces him to go forward anyways. Fortunately, far deep problems soon came to light threatening the Minbari people. Forel, another member of the religious caste, soon came to Babylon 5 to relay news about strange raiders attacking an alien race that was part of the Minbari Protectorate. Delenn immediately sets out with a small fleet of White Stars accompanied by Furlan and Lanier to investigate. They soon encounter a small fleet of ships identified as the Drakh. Furlan admits that he is familiar with them. At gunpoint, he forces Delenn to order her fleet to follow the Drakh ships to a rendezvous point with the Drakh task force. He also insists that they allow an emissary to come aboard. Delenn is immediately unnerved by the strange dark alien that comes aboard. Furlan explains that he sought the Drakh out and wishes to ally with them against the warrior class, who have become openly hostile to the religious castes in the wake of the Grey Council's disbandment. He relates how the warrior class expelled all religious from the city of Selkar after disabling their personal vehicles, forcing them to walk through a frozen wasteland to the nearest city. Over half of them died on the journey, including Furlan's family. He explained that the Drakh only wanted a home of their own and could be trusted to protect them against the warrior class. Delenn feigns agreement to consider this proposal, recognizing that the Drakh could only have been allies of the Shadows. Once Furlan lets slip who she is, the emissary noticeably takes interest. Delenn knows that they will attack as soon as the emissary is clear. Reacting quickly, she orders the fleet to make a running withdrawal. They successfully make it into hyperspace, though one of the White Stars is destroyed and a few others damaged, including her own. Furlan is killed in the attack. Rather than retreat, Delenn orders the White Stars to return and surprise attack the Drakh task force. They completely annihilate the Drakh carrier and its escorts. And we'll be right back after this. Back on the station, Delenn explains to Sheridan about the Drakh. She also tells him that she has to return to Minbar and will be gone indefinitely. She tells him that this may be for the best. However, as the escalating tensions of the Earth Alliance civil war will force him to be dangerous, and she feels he can do that better if she is not there. Delenn boards a Minbari cruiser controlled by the religious caste. As it heads towards Minbar, she learns that fighting between the castes have broken out at the capital city. Outright war has begun. She contacts Neroon and asks him to come aboard her ship, which he cautiously agrees to. Her own people are suspicious of this move, fearing that she intends for the religious caste to surrender to the warriors. Neroon still maintains some suspicions regarding her ultimate moves as well. Meeting with him privately, she explains that once again she has no intentions to rule as a dictator, but insists that neither caste should be allowed to ascend over the other. She outlines a bold plan that will quickly end the conflict before it can escalate. A plan that will allow both castes to retain honor and give neither the advantage. Neroon agrees to her proposal, remarking at how much they have changed over such a short time. Soon afterwards, however, he is assaulted by one of his officers, who believes he intends for the warrior class to surrender to the religious. The officer is arrested, and Delenn reiterates to her people that neither side can be allowed dominance. Not even an hour later, Delenn learns that Lanier is in the infirmary, critically injured. Neroon's personal surgeons attend him. They are able to stabilize him, though the operation requires the removal of part of his lung. Once he regains consciousness, he explains that he had detected a gas leak in one of the engines and sealed it himself, leading to this condition. Delenn accepts his explanation, never learning the truth about why he did it. Later that night, Lanier awakens Delenn to alert her that Neroon has taken a personal flyer and left the ship, seemingly betraying the alliance forged with Delenn. Delenn weeps as news continues to report the war is heating up. Much of the capital city, which she loves, is in ruins. She admits her feeling of guilt to Lanier, who tries to comfort her by explaining her breaking the council was simply a step in Valen's prophecies. Delenn points out that Valen was not really prophesying, but remembering an event. Shortly thereafter, they arrived on Minbar and began confronting and attending the many injured among the religious caste. Severely outmatched by the warriors, the religious caste is facing a crushing defeat. Delenn alerts the leader of the warriors that the religious caste wishes to surrender to the warriors. She sent this word through Neroon, who arranges for their leader to meet her and the others in the Temple of Varen, an ancient site where leaders of the Minbari were chosen in ancient times. This event is broadcast live across all the planet. Delenn agrees to the surrender but surprises Shikiri, the leader of the warrior caste, when she announces that the surrender does not mean the religious caste is giving up all their rights to choose a new leadership. She points out that if the old ways were being restored, that the leadership should be chosen as it was before, using the Starfire Wheel. Shikiri attempts to avoid this, but Narun calls him out, saying that he will appear as a coward if he does not step into the wheel with Delenn. Shikiri reluctantly does so with Delenn. As the searing heart of the fire wheel intensifies, Shikiri begs Delenn for them to walk out together. Delenn insists that a true leader must be prepared to die for his people. Shikiri leaps from the wheel to save himself, contrary to the plan she developed with Narun. Delenn stays inside it, willing to die for her people. Narun is unwilling to let that happen, however. He enters the wheel and removes it from her, taking the full brunt of the wheel's power himself, which causes his own death. In his last moments, he calls out that his heart belongs to the religious caste. Though severely burned by the wheel, Delenn insists on carrying out the next steps immediately to prevent any future chaos. She reforms the Grey Council, but this time changes the makeup of it. Only 2 members of the warrior and religious caste will be members, while the other 5 will be from the worker class, who previously had always been overshadowed by the other 2, or caught in the middle between their fightings. Delenn does not take a place on the new council, though she still retains her rank of Inthala. The brief but bitter Mimbar civil war comes to an end, and the rebuilding begins again. Returning to Earth, Delenn spent the next few weeks helping to rebuild Mimbar. In the meantime, Sheridan and his allies began to strike back offensively against President Clark's forces. They convinced all other races to suspend their treaties of mutual aid and defense with the Earth Alliance and began the long march towards Earth, rallying more defecting ships and allies with each step. Unfortunately, Clark's forces capture John's father. Garibaldi contacts John with a promise of helping him rescue his father, and John decides to take the chance. He orders Ivanova, who had been left in charge of Babylon 5, to replace him at the head of the fleet. Delenn arrives back on the station just before Ivanova leaves and agrees to assume de facto control of the station during the interim. Garibaldi's appeal, however, turned out to be a trap, as he was being controlled by Bester at the time. John was captured and held in a secure facility, though Garibaldi himself, along with Dr. Franklin and Lita Alexander, were able to rescue him after a few days. Back on the station, Lanier alerts Delenn to a council meeting convened by Ambassador Malari, without having invited Delenn or the Minbari representative. Frustrated and anxious about what Malari may be up to, Delenn marches into the council chamber. She is shocked to discover that Lando called the meeting to summon all the other worlds to an active role in supporting Sheridan, rather than simply sitting out the conflict. Lando apologizes for keeping Delenn out of the loop. He explains that he did so because he feared Clark's people or political enemies might have justified the action as being driven by Delenn solely because of her relationship with Sheridan. Delenn is delighted by the showing of support. Afterward, she leaves as head of the Joint Task Force. However, before her forces can join with the rebelling ships, a shuttle is picked up by Marcus Cole, forced to abandon ship with the badly injured Ivanova, following the Battle of Sector 300. They are brought aboard the Minbari vessel so Ivanova can be treated, but her diagnosis is grim. A few hours later, the freed Sheridan comes aboard, rushing into the arms of a joyful Delenn. The two then go to Susan's bedside. She accepts her impending death stoically, asking that Sheridan win the Civil War from the bridge of the EAS Agamemnon rather than a White Star. Ivanova is sent back to Babylon 5, and the fleet is assembled to finish the war. After neutralizing most of Clark's forces at the Battle of Mars, the fleet moves on to Earth itself. As they prepare to leave hyperspace, Lanier suddenly joins Delenn on her ship. Surprised when she has no knowledge of an alleged request she made summoning him, Lanier realizes that Marcus tricked him into leaving the White Star that they were both stationed on. Even as he realizes this, their monitors confirm Marcus Marcus has taken the ship back towards Babylon 5, disabling its communications. Lanier explains that Marcus has learned about the alien healing machine and is pretty sure he intends to use it on Ivanova. Delenn contacts Sheridan and lets him know of this development. Unable to break communication silence, Sheridan decides there's nothing that can be done. They press forward with the liberation of Earth. Deranged and embittered, President Clark commits suicide before he can be arrested. Just beforehand, however, he commands the orbiting defense platform surrounding Earth to fire on the planet itself. Sheridan and his allies desperately engage the platform before they can fire. The Agamemnon is badly damaged and prepares to ram the final platform. For a moment, Delenn fears that she has witnessed its destruction, but luckily the EAS Apollo join the fight in time to save the Agamemnon and take out the remaining satellite. The Earth Alliance civil war finally comes to an end, and we'll be right back after this. A new alliance for the Third Age. Delenn decides to head back to Babylon 5, allowing Sheridan to face the inevitable situation he now faces as having head the insurrection. Though he is forced to resign from Earth Force, he and everyone who served under him is granted amnesty. No sooner does Delenn arrive back on the station than she heads back for Earth, taking Londo, Jakar, and representatives of the League with her. Along the way, she reveals the plans that she and Sheridan have been forming all year. The framework for a new alliance of worlds. On Earth, after Sheridan's press conference, Delenn announces over ISN the formation of a new interstellar alliance with the Rangers serving as its peacekeeping force. The League of Non-Aligned Worlds will be dissolved in favor of this new alliance, which the Centauri and Narn have already agreed to join. Delenn, Londo, and Jakar meet with the acting EA president to explain more details. Delenn offers artificial gravity to Earth as an incentive to join. She also explains that the three of them will act as the advisory board, but the alliance will be led by a president, none other than John Sheridan. Afterwards, Delenn agrees for John's father, David Sheridan, to meet them in Geneva. Father and son joyfully reunite. David is thrilled to learn that Delenn will be his new daughter-in-law. After some more formalities to attend to, John and Delenn head back with most of the others aboard a White Star. En route, they are married in a small private ceremony. When they arrive back on Babylon 5, they find that Stephen Franklin and Michael Garibaldi have prepared a large reception for them, celebrating their marriage and the birth of the Interstellar Alliance. Delenn is a little embarrassed by the gesture, worried that it will come off as grandstanding. John points out that what they have achieved is worth celebrating, even if 100 years from now, no one remembers them. Prior to Sheridan's inauguration ceremony, Captain Elizabeth Lockley arrives to take command of Babylon 5. Susan Ivanova has accepted a promotion and moved on, partly out of her grief over Marcus, who gave his life to save hers. A few days after the inauguration, Delenn is contacted by Ruel to discuss the replacement of her aide. Delenn is shocked to learn that Lanier has asked to be replaced. She immediately confronts him over the issue. Lanier explains that he feels he can no longer serve effectively in his current role. He explains that he has decided to join the Rangers, filling the void left by the death of Marcus. Delenn suspects the truth. Lanier wishes to leave because he loves her and cannot be around her now that she is married to Sheridan. He tells her he wishes to earn her fuller respect, to which she tells him that he has it completely. Nevertheless, Lanier remains adamant and departs the station soon thereafter. Later that year, she is delighted to find out she is pregnant. At the end of the year, she and Sheridan leave for Mimbar to take up residence at the Alliance headquarters. During the journey home, Lanier betrays Delenn's trust by leaving Sheridan to die during an accident on board the White Star. 20 years later, in the years that follow, Delenn would continue to be a force in the politics for the Alliance, eventually taking over as ISA president herself in 2279, when Sheridan declined re-election, wanting instead to use his remaining years to focus on the Rangers. Sheridan in turn took over for Delenn to become the new Inthlazah for a time. Before Sheridan passed beyond the rim in 2281, he and Delenn hosted a small private dinner, inviting their surviving friends to come together one last time before the end. The next morning, after a wreckingly emotional goodbye, Sheridan left Delenn and Mimbar for the last time, asserting that it would help Delenn keep the Alliance together if he died quietly out among the stars, going to the sea, as the Mimbari called it. A few days later, Sheridan's White Star was found abandoned near Coriana 6, its airlock sealed, but no trace of her husband inside. Shortly thereafter, Delenn attended the decommissioning ceremony of the now defunct Babylon 5 alongside Emperor Veer, Michael Garibaldi, Zach Allen, General Stephen Franklin, and General Ivanova, who accepted Delenn's offer to become the new Analashak Na and leader of the Rangers. Working alongside Delenn, Susan spent the rest of her life serving as Ranger 1, never marrying, choosing instead to dedicate her life to her work. She expanded the roster of membership in the Analashak to include representatives of every member of world and instituting a system of honor and self-sacrifice that was unparalleled for centuries to come. Delenn also supported Ivanova's order that the body of Marcus Cole be kept in cryonic suspension for as long as it took to restore him to life. And we'll be back after this. Delenn continued serving as president for many years until finally stepping down and withdrawing entirely from public life. By 2362, some questioned that Delenn was even still alive, claiming that at 140, she'd be 20 years older than the oldest Minbari on record. The leading theory was that the Alliance and the Rangers were intentionally perpetuating the myth of Delenn as a way of holding the Alliance together. Such theories were shattered on the 100th anniversary of the ISA, when she suddenly and unexpectedly emerged from seclusion to correct the increasingly cynical perception of John Sheridan by historians and academics, leaving as suddenly and quietly as she arrived. As with her husband, Delenn's ultimate fate and her journey remained shrouded in mystery. The last time she was seen or heard from, she had embarked on a quest involving Balin. In the years and centuries after Delenn traveled beyond, her name and exploits of her and her contemporaries became legendary. Even after almost 200 years, the words of Delenn were still followed on Minbar, and almost 1,000 years after her passing, in the ruins of Earth following the Great Burn, illuminated manuscripts still tell of the words and deeds of Ivanova the Strong, the Blessed Sheridan, and Delenn the Wise. Thank you for watching the history of Babylon 5.